So I've been reading the Bible, and apparently one of the wisest people in existence, King Solomon, had 700 wives and 300 concubines. How is that wise? Like, I know the saying, happy wife, happy life. That's a lot of wives to keep happy. So I wanted to understand who this guy is. Apparently, King Solomon came into power over Israel when he was 18 years old. It was 980 BC when he came into power, and he ruled for 40 years. And at the start, things went really well. You know, like trade was booming. He had united the kingdoms. He had all these riches and rewards. And the story is that one night he was dreaming, and the Lord came to him and said, Solomon, what do you desire? Like, what do you want? And this guy says, I want wisdom and understanding of the heart. And he was granted this by God. And he became this really wise person where people would come from all around the world, kings, queens, just to hear him speak, just to hear his wisdom. And they would give him riches. I think one of the queens gave him like 400 tons of gold. He was so wise. He wrote this whole book of Proverbs that I'm currently reading. And what was interesting, right, is like, what happened? Because he has 700 wives, 300 concubines. He even writes in the Proverbs itself, he says, share your love with only your wife. Not like multiple wives, not multiple women. He says, with only your wife. He even says, why spill the water of your springs on the streets, having sex with just anyone? You should reserve it for yourselves. Never share it with strangers. So he's very clear about this relationship with their wife, one person. And yet he has multiple wives. And he even writes at the end of this chapter, he says, he will die for lack of self-control. He will be lost because of his great foolishness. And the interesting thing about this for me is that he's writing this book when he's younger, when he's been granted this wisdom, and he's kind of warning his future self about all of the things that can get in the way of wisdom. And then he goes ahead and he has multiple wives, and that kind of leads to his downfall. He ended up idolizing other gods. He made sacrifices. The kingdom of Israel kind of like disbanded and was weak at the end of his reign. And what that tells me is that wisdom is a gift granted from God, but it is not taken away, but it can be rejected by the person. And I think there's a big difference there, that wisdom is not taken away from Solomon, but he chooses to indulge in his own fleshly desires, and that leads to his downfall, that the rejection of wisdom from his life. And then it kind of got me thinking, like, well, if I've rejected wisdom in the past, like Solomon, then how do I get it back? How do I find wisdom again? And clearly he did, because he writes this book Ecclesiastes at the end of his life, kind of reflecting on everything that he's done. And it seems like a wise reflection. One of the cool verses that I read in James, as I was like doing some research on this, is if you need wisdom, ask our generous God and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. And I think that is so cool, because God is really generous. He gives, he grants wisdom. Even to people that have rejected it, like King Solomon, he can grant it again, and he does. But it all comes back to having that fear of God and actually chasing after wisdom and seeking it out and actually asking and crying out for help. And I think there's something so beautiful about this. Like, the Bible doesn't use perfect characters. The only perfect character in the Bible is God and Jesus. But everyone else, they have these riches, they have these rewards, like Solomon or David, and then they end up screwing it up. But yet there's always this forgiveness from God. There's a way back. And I think that's so beautiful, because I screw up all the time and I'm not wise at all. Like, I pray that I have more of a fear of the Lord so that I can gain more wisdom. But I also pray that God keeps me safe when, if he decides to grant me riches and rewards like King Solomon, it seems so easy to lose yourself in those moments, because you just gain all this material stuff and then you feel like you've done it on your own accord. But in reality, it's God. And there's so many lessons in this. Well, I'm pretty keen to keep reading Proverbs. This is really interesting. I feel like even if you don't believe in God, there's so much to learn here.